Hello, everybody. This is Paul with Torah Life Ministries. We continue to read our Bible every day. We're up to 1 Corinthians 13. Now, this is a short chapter, but it's one of the most commonly read and popular chapters of all of the scriptures. It's talking about love. So, if you want to turn to 1 Corinthians 13 and read along with me, and before we do that, we're going to open up in prayer with the Shema found in Deuteronomy 6:4-9. Shema Yisrael. Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Kivo, Mahuto, Leolam Vaed. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And have these words which I command you this day be upon your heart. And you shall teach them diligently to your children. And speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you retire, and when you rise. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and let them be frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. All righty. So we have been looking at Paul speaking in the Corinth church about the behavior of believers and how it should be. And Paul was hearing all these things about what was going on there that wasn't good and wasn't according to his teachings. So we wrote this letter explaining these things. And now he gets up to this chapter where he's talking about love. And it says here in 13:1, if I could speak all the languages of the earth and of angels, but I didn't love others, I would only be in a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. Now remember, the church were not getting along. Different historical set of believers. You had Jewish believers in Yeshua. You had non-Jewish believers in Yeshua, and a whole bunch of people in this pagan culture around them. But here they were, those that claimed to believe together, but they were still having separations and divisions. And it says here in verse 1, the note. In chapter 12, Paul gave evidence of the Corinthians' lack of love in the utilization of spiritual gifts. Chapter 13 defines real love, and chapter 14 shows how love works. Love is more important than all spiritual gifts exercised in the church body. Great faith, acts of devotion or sacrifice, and miracles, miracle working power, have little effect without love. Love makes our actions and gifts useful. Although people have different gifts, love is available to everyone. And in the Hebraic root scripture, it says, Paul is introduced in the subject of the angelic language, but is simply, it says Paul is not introducing the subject of angelic language, but is simply making an overstated emphasis on how important love is. So, verse 2 says, if I had a gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of Yahweh's secret plans, and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that could move mountains, but didn't love others, I would be nothing. That's verse 2. And verse 3 says, if I gave everything I have to the poor, and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. And verse 3 here says, Yahweh's very nature and character is based on true, genuine, Elohim guided love, which is unconditional, all empowering, and unintending. And in one New Man Bible, it says a 5th century manuscript misspelled the word translated boast, changing the meaning to burn. Interesting. So, understanding these things, I did a whole series called the Suffer Well Devotional Series. And in that series, I had a whole section on the chapter of the true love of our wonderful Creator and what that truly means. Now, verse 4 to to verse 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wrong. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures throughout all circumstances. The note here for 4 to 7 says, our society confuses love and lust. Unlike lust, Yahweh's kind of love is directed outward towards others, not inward towards ourselves. It is utterly unselfish. This kind of love goes against our natural instincts. It is impossible to have this love unless Yahweh helps us set aside our own natural desires so that we can love and not expect anything in return. Thus, the more we become like Yahshua, the more love we will show others. And going back to verse 5, it says here in the note, Paul says that love is not irritable. Sometimes we're irritated by or angered by others, and we don't know why. Not all inability stems from sinful or selfish motives. Although the irritable treatment of others surely is wrong, much irritability comes from love of perfection and a deep desire that programs, meetings, and structures be run perfectly. A desire to run things perfectly can erupt into anger at events and people who gather the way or the truth that desire. Those who are easily irritated need to remember that perfection exists only in Yahweh. We need to love Him and our fellow believers, not the visions we have for perfection here on earth. So that was from verse 5 to 7. Then we read verse 8. Prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge will become useless, but love will last forever. And if you know, in the previous chapter, they were talking about those gifts. It says, but love will last forever. Now, our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. And then in verse 11, he says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, just as Yahweh knows me completely. So the note here from 10 to 12 says, when Paul wrote of full understanding, he was referring to when we must see Yeshua face to face. Yahweh gives believers spiritual gifts for their lives on earth in order to build up, serve, and strengthen fellow believers. The spiritual gifts are for the church. In eternity, we will be made perfect and complete and will be in the very presence of Yahweh. We will no longer need the spiritual gifts. So they will come to an end. Then we will have fully understanding and appreciation for one another as unique expressions of Yahweh's infinite creativity. We will use our differences as a reason to praise Yahweh. Based on the perspective of each other with the same love, let us treat each other with the same love and unity that we will one day share. And for verse 11, in the Hebraic root scriptures, the Aramaic word here is grona, which means a protection guardian. And that was for verse 11 when it says, when I was an infant, I spoke as an infant. I thought as an infant. I was reasoned as an infant. But when I became a man or or a guard, someone to guard, or a guardian. I put away childish things. In verse 11, let's see, so that was verse 11. We read verse 12. And then finally, verse 13 says, three things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And it says here, Paul wrote that love endures forever. In morally corrupt Corinth, love had become a mixed up term with little meaning. Today, people are still confused about love. Love is the greatest of all of human qualities and is an attitude of Yahweh himself. Love involves unselfish service to others. Faith is the foundation and content of Yahweh's message. Hope is the attitude and focus. Love is the action. When faith and hope are in line, you are free to love completely because you understand how Yahweh loves. Does your faith fully express itself in loving others? That is chapter 13 of the book of First Corinthians. A short chapter, but an important chapter as we get ready to read 14. Thank you for reading the scriptures with me here every day. Have a blessed day. Keep reading your word, and shalom, shalom.